I'm Rodney A. Brooks. Welcome to RodneyABrooks.com. Today we welcome Caine Crawford, who's President and Benefits Counselor at the Federal Employees Advocacy Group in Denver, Colorado. Welcome, Caine.
Thanks, Rodney. Glad to be here.
Okay, so today we want to talk about retirement options for federal employees, and I know you've written a book on the subject, so I know
Yes, sir.
I already know you're an expert on the topic. So, if there are a couple of things pieces of advice that you want to give to federal employees, because they have a system that's different from the private sector. So maybe let's start out with just a little bit about how it's different, and then we can talk about how that may make them have different different options.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, the original three-legged stool that people maybe have heard of in the way past, came with a pension, it came with a savings plan, and then it incorporated Social Security. And the government worker, the federal employee, still has all three of those pieces, where maybe most of corporate America is only down to a two-legged stool, and in some cases the savings is such lacking that it's a one-legged stool. So it's a balancing act. But what most federal employees need to understand is that they have to know what they've got, and then really know how to make it work for them, not just the group, the 2+ million employees that are in the group. So understanding the benefits, kind of when you're going to be able to retire, when and how much you're going to make, as I should say, as a pension, are really important things. And then probably the biggest thing is your TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan, and how to make sure that's growing the way you want it to be growing during your working career.
So how do you make sure? It's growing? What do you do?
Most federal employees that I speak to, before COVID, I was in a different federal office every day of the week. Now I'm on a different federal screen every day of the week, and so many people tell me, I wish I would have learned about the funds or the options within the TSP when I got hired. So we're always working on trying to get into those early Fed careers and teach them about the funds that are available within the TSP. You've just got to understand that there are options. There are safe options like a money market, and then there are high risk options like international funds and stock market type funds. So they've really got to understand the differences between those funds, and then be able to use their own risk tolerance to decide how much and how fast they want that money to grow.
Okay, so what are those funds within the TSP?
So to break it down, there's 5 basic funds, and they're all index funds of sorts. There's a G fund, which is the guaranteed fund, or like I said earlier, the money market type fund, but that's earning about 1% or just shy of 1% right now. The F fund, as in Frank, is the typical bond fund. The bond funds, like all bond funds, are typically going to go up when stock markets come down. They're going to go down a little bit when stock markets go up. So it's good to understand that. Then you've got your 3 stock indexes, or your growth indexes, which are the C as in Charlie, the S as in Sam, and then the I as in, I don't even know what I is supposed to be, indigo or something. So the C fund is going to be your S&P 500. I think most folks have heard of Warren Buffett, the financial genius that he is, says if you don't know everything about finance like he does, the S&P 500 is a great place to invest your money. So the TSP came with a C fund, which is based on the S&P 500, so it's a great choice. The S fund is a small caps, more of the Dow Jones or Russell type of you can watch those indexes and see what's going on. And it's going to be a little more aggressive. It's going to have harder swings up and down. Funny enough, the C and the S over a 10-year time period are probably averaging within a point of each other. So they're both good stock indexes. And then there's the I fund, the international fund, which is currently being reviewed as one that they want to fix. It's never really been as strong as they really wanted it to be, but it's probably going to be adjusted here soon. But that's the index that is going to be giving you some international investment strategies, so you aren't just stuck in the American investments.
Okay, so let's talk about the other 2 legs of the stool.
They're the two legs of the stool, right? The one that everybody's got, as long as we've got it, is the Social Security, obviously, right? A lot of my young feds aren't even counting on that. They don't know what it's going to look like. I think last time we looked at it, it was solvent until about 2034. But what happens after that, we don't know. So Social Security being that second leg, and then the pension, the actual FERS or Federal Employee Retirement System pension is probably the biggest benefit to being a federal employee aside from the health insurance. That's going to be based on a percentage of what they call their high three. The highest consecutive 3 years salary that the federal employee has is what they'll base that pension portion on.
So I'm gonna guess that federal employees, because they have a pension, that they are in many cases better off than private sector employees who don't have a pension.
I think that's probably a safe guess. I think that's a safe guess.
Okay.
I mean, because some of them, the older version of the pensions could actually get up to 80% of their salary, which those folks didn't have Social Security, but to be able to get up to 80% of your working salary was pretty huge. The FERS, the current version of what the federal employee retirement system looks like, is up to a 40%. So if you've got three stools and you can manage 30 to 35% or 30 to 40% of your current salary out of each one of those pieces, you're going to easily replace your income, when you go into retirement.
Now, we've talked before, and you've talked about some cases where people not just equaled their income after retirement, that they actually exceeded it. Now how is that possible?
Yeah, right. That's what people say. If you can do that, I'm in. Right, let's do it. And it's all about the income plan. We do a lot of income planning where maybe a lot of maybe wealth management folks or brokerage folks that are kind of in my position do more accumulation and long-term planning in terms of growth and strategies for accumulation. We focus on the income. When it comes down to retirement, what your money grew at over the last 20, 30, 40 years is not necessarily irrelevant, but it's not going to get you to, the end. What got you, I was saying, and I said in the book, what got you to retirement may not be the same strategy that'll get you through retirement. But so when you figure out that income kind of strategy, and you realize that maybe the average Fed's going to get 30% of their high three, which means like if they have $100,000 salary, their pension portion is going to be, say, $30,000. And then Social Security, is averaging between $2,000 and $3,000 a month for federal employees. So maybe that's another, $30,000 if you look at that. So now you're at $60,000. So if you've done the right thing and you've got, say over 400,000 in your TSP, which is honestly just a little more than the average TSP, which that's a conversation by itself, you could easily take out another 25 or 30,000 a year without ever really touching the balance if you just start living on the interest. So with three legs at 30,000 a piece, you're probably going to be bringing home really close to, if not more in a lot of cases, than your actual bring home salary was when you look at all the deductions. We talk a lot about your salary. I've got this big $160,000 salary, but I only bring home $95,000 after deductions. Those are the numbers we're looking at as the bring home salary. So if we can get your bring home above your current bring home, that's going to be a good thing when you look at the expenses that might come along in retirement.
Okay, now you specialize in federal employees now.
Yes, sir.
If there are three mistakes that you see when somebody comes to see you for guidance, what would those three things be?
Probably the biggest mistake I've seen is the investment strategy in the TSP. A lot of people, when you get your job, they put you in, when you open the TSP account, they put you in the G fund. They put you in the basic fund that's not going to earn. I mean, historically, maybe it's earned upwards of 2 or 3 or 4%, but recently, in the most recent 10, 12 years, it's been less than 2% average. So that's probably the number one mistake, is people not realizing that 1, 2, 10, 15 years later, they never moved that money and they didn't build the strategy for growth. So now they feel, a lot of them feel like they're behind at that point in time. So that'd be the number one, is understand those TSP options early. And then number two is not putting enough into the TSP, honestly. A lot of people have maybe heard the strategy or the theory of only put in to your employer plan what your employer matches. I understand that theory, other than the TSP is potentially the best working plan that you can get. It's got great choices. It's got great growth history, and it's got very low fees, where a typical 401k on the outside world is going to have much more fees. So 10, 15, 20% of your salary should be going into your savings. And then maybe the third mistake would be, honestly, when we talk about the retiring federal employee, is not having a plan for after you leave the job. A lot of people I talk to even put off retirement because they don't know what retirement's going to look like. They don't know what they're going to be doing. They've been doing this job for whether it be 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They don't know what they're going to do next. And I've seen, sadly, I've had a couple of clients that I've helped finally get through the transition, and they only lived a couple of years in retirement. They just didn't have that plan, that succession plan to their job. What do we do next?
Okay. Now, I assume, like many financial advisors and benefit counselors, that you would like to see people come in earlier than they do, and not wait until near retirement.
Much earlier, yeah, much earlier.
Yes. So tell me about that. What at what age are people coming in to see you?
Honestly, today I just spoke to a 29-year-old gal that works for the CDC down in Georgia. She's only had the job for 2 years, so that's, I could have talked to her 2 years ago, but that's better than having her call me 20 years from now and realizing she didn't do what she should have done. Honestly, I've got a money 101 kind of a class that I teach these young folks. Just understand what the benefits look like, and then really how to make them perform for you specifically as an employee, not just the group that they were designed for. So yeah, a lot of this new generation's coming in their late 20s, early 30s. That's definitely as soon as they walk in the door as a federal employee, should be looking for somebody like me. There's a few folks out there, more in your area than probably anywhere else, but yeah, the earlier the better, right?
Okay. So I assume you have people sometimes who come in and they're already put in their paperwork, and so what do you do in that case? I mean, are there cases where you actually have to say, well, you may not be able to retire and live the same lifestyle you used to?
Yeah, sadly enough, there's several of those cases, and I guess if there's a good thing to that is a lot of those folks maybe have already accepted the fact that, hey, I know Social Security is going to be this, and I've got a little bit of money coming from my TSP because I didn't do a lot with it, and the pension is going to kind of fill in the gaps. And then for those folks, I try to help them make no mistakes in their paperwork. I try to make sure that they get they basically squeeze that that pension, and they squeeze that paperwork out for every dollar that they've got coming. And then we start looking for how to save some money. Is it better to go on to Medicare, or is it better to stay on your federal employee health benefit? So we look at a lot of those things. But yeah, there are a lot of folks that finally come to the end and say, yeah, I maybe didn't do what I should have. Or, of course, I got divorced along the way. She took, whatever. So there's a lot of situations that are out there, but we always try to find a way to at least make the transition as smooth as possible.
Now, you mentioned figuring out whether they should go on Medicare or stick with the federal health. Was it the federal health plan? Okay, so how?
PHP.
So how do you make that decision? Is it better for some people to stay on the federal plan and others to go on Medicare health? What do you look at for that? It
really comes down to the style of health care that you like. I'm not I'm not a healthcare specialist. I'm not a political guy or any sort of a government worker, even to that effect. But it comes down to a very personal decision of, I like my doctors. Some of them say they won't take Medicare. Some of them would rather take Medicare than maybe the one of the choices that maybe the federal employee has. So it comes down to where I'm going to live, what are my options in terms of my facilities and or my doctors, and what do they like to take? And then I guess at the end of the day, the cost, because as a federal employee, you don't have to take Medicare Part B. Everybody in America takes Part A at 65, right? You've got that 7-month window, 3 months before your birthday, the month of your birthday, and 3 months after your birthday to turn on, and that's your 65th birthday, by the way, to turn on Medicare Part A. The federal employee can choose the Part B as well, but there's always a cost, and it's all based on your earnings in terms of whether you pay the lower end or the higher end. So for a lot of employees, they enjoy their health insurance. Maybe they've got a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, and their doctors are all on the plan. They know what it costs. It's not going to be cheap. It's cheaper than most folks. It's a lot cheaper than my insurance, but it's going to be probably a little more expensive than Medicare. But that's why they don't need to take both. You don't need to double your health insurance costs and add a secondary, coverage plan that's just going to be a secondary coverage. You don't need it. Some folks, on the other hand, like I said, are coming out with only Social Security. They're coming out with very small pension, and the health insurance that costs $400 for the couple is going to be a little less expensive if they went on Medicare. So it really comes to factors.
Okay, so tell me, somebody 50, 55 comes into your office. What kind of, or calls you up? What kind of advice do you have for somebody who is nearing retirement, that close to retirement, but has some time to make it? Actually, I don't know how much time they have to make adjustments, but they have some time to make adjustments. What kind of advice do you give somebody who is closing in on retirement, who is a federal employee?
Same kind of basis, right? Understand where you're at. Figure out where the gap is between where you thought you would be or where you want to be at retirement. I always use the PDCA, right? You plan, you do, you check it, then you adjust it. If you're not doing that all through your career, at least do that within the last 5 years or so of your career to make sure that I want to replace my income. Well, what's got me here so far, I won't replace my income. So what do I now have to change in order to make that happen? So we do a lot of game planning, a lot of strategy talks with those folks, 2 years to 7 years kind of out, and make sure that if there are some changes that need to be made, whether it be more contributions to TSP, whether it simply be made, moving from the money market, the G fund, over to the C fund for a few years to get some growth, we make those fine-tuned adjustments to make sure that at least they're heading on the right path. And for a lot of folks, they can make up for it. You can put $26,000 into your TSP. That with their government match for most people out there is going to be well into the $30,000 range per year. So if you could do that for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more years, you can drastically improve the dollar amount in your TSP. So that's what we usually focus on is kind of how to start fine tuning that growth plan, and then really start looking at, how are we going to spend this money? How is it really going to come back to the employee? And sometimes we can even put those plans into place as long as they're over 59 and a half. We may start be able to put those plans into place ahead of time.
Okay, so tell me about the book, the title of the book, and where people with federal employees can find it.
Oh, I should have brought one with. I would have plugged it. So it's the Educated Fed by Caine Crawford. It's going to be the ultimate guide to understanding and maximizing your federal benefits. You can find it on Amazon.com. I'm sure Rodney has my information. Maybe you'll put it on the screen at some point. You can reach out to me direct and I can send you a copy, but Amazon.com, you've got them right there.
Okay, and your social media, you have a webpage?
our website. We're we go by the Advocacy group because we're not highfalutin. We don't have a big fancy office in some ivory tower. So we try to keep things simple. You can get the basics of the information you need on our website. It's just myfeag.us. Actually, it's .us.com, .org. Whatever you type in about myfeag, that's Federal Employee Advocacy Group, you'll get to our website, and you'll see my picture. You'll see a couple of our counselors on there, and get some of the basics. And you can even order your book online right there.
Okay. So, is there anything we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
The earlier you get a hold of someone like me, I mean, one thing I didn't actually say is FINRA, has recognized a federal retirement counselor designation that we are, all of us here at the Federal Employee Advocacy Group are designated as federal retirement counselors, FRCs. Which if it means anything, it means FINRA understands that we know more about the federal benefits package and the retirement plan for a Fed than maybe most folks. So it's always a good idea to make sure if you're speaking to someone, make sure that they don't federal employee business, make sure they understand like we do. The only people that we talk to that aren't federal employees are the spouses of federal employees. So we've made it our life's purpose to understand and know and how to get that federal employee to retirement. So dealing with someone like me is pretty important.
Okay. Well, thank you. We appreciate your time today. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Rodney, thanks for having me on. It's good to see you.
And we're talking to Caine Crawford, President and Benefits Counselor at the Federal Employees Counselor Group in Denver, Colorado. Thanks again.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.